All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about Elon Musk, a name that's basically become synonymous with disruption. This is a guy who hasn't just entered industries, he's completely torn up their rulebooks and started over.
Get this, by the end of 2025, Elon Musk's net worth is expected to hit a massive $754 billion. That would make him the wealthiest person in history. But that number, as absolutely insane as it is, really only scratches the surface of the real story here. So how on earth did one guy build an empire that's literally shaping our future? To get that, we have to look past the money. We need to dig into his core way of thinking, the insane risks he took, and the big strategic pivots that built this whole interconnected web of companies.
Okay, so let's dive in. We're going to break down his fundamental method, then we'll follow his journey from online payments all the way to space. After that, we'll get into his huge pivot to AI and robotics, try to make sense of the whole X and XAI merger, and then finally, we'll take a look at his more recent and, let's be honest, very polarizing role in politics.
To really understand Musk, you have to get how he thinks. It really all boils down to one core principle that he applies to absolutely everything. Doesn't matter if it's building a rocket or running a social media company. Okay, so this is his secret sauce. Instead of just looking at how things have always been done, he goes back to the absolute basics. He asks, what are the fundamental laws of physics here? What's actually possible? So, for example, instead of just buying a rocket, he asked what a rocket is made of. Aluminum, titanium, copper. He figured out the cost of the raw materials and realized he could build them himself for just a tiny fraction of the going price. He just builds from the ground up, completely ignoring decades of this is how we do it.
And you can totally see this mindset taking shape super early on. He had this lonely childhood in South Africa where he'd just read encyclopedias for fun. He taught himself how to code and then sold his first video game, a little thing called Blastar, for $500 when he was only 12 years old. The pattern was always there. Take it apart, understand it, and then build it better.
Okay, so let's see what happens when you put this method into action. His early success in the dot-com boom, well, that was never the final goal. It was just the launch pad he needed for something way, way bigger. He sold his first company, Zip2, and personally pocketed about $22 million. And what did he do? He immediately put all of it into his next venture, X.com, which, as you probably know, eventually became PayPal. So when eBay bought PayPal in 2002, Musk was the biggest shareholder, and he walked away with a cool $180 million.
And this, right here, is what separates him from pretty much everyone else. Any normal person would have diversified that money, right? Played it safe. But not Musk. He did the exact opposite. He took every single dollar he had and bet the entire farm on 3 ventures that almost everyone at the time said were completely impossible. Private spaceflight, electric cars, and solar energy. All in.
For SpaceX, it was never just about building rockets. It was about survival. The whole point from day one was to make humanity multiplanetary. To give us a backup plan in case something terrible ever happens here on Earth. The early days were absolutely brutal. The first Falcon 1 rocket blew up. The second one failed. The third one failed. By August of 2008, he was on the ropes. Both SpaceX and Tesla were literally on the verge of going bankrupt, and he had just enough money left for one last shot.
But then, in September 2008, that fourth launch worked. It actually made it to orbit. It was a huge moment, the first privately funded liquid fuel rocket to ever do that. And that one single success was enough to land a game-changing $1.6 billion contract from NASA to resupply the space station. That deal saved the company and basically paved the way for everything that came next.
All right, now this next part is fascinating. Let's talk about Tesla, because the entire mission of his most famous company has completely flipped. A lot of people still think of it as a car company, but that's just not how Musk sees it anymore. Not at all. So if you go back to 2006, the master plan was all about accelerating the world's move to sustainable energy. But by 2025, that focus has radically shifted. Now, Tesla's real goal is to solve real-world artificial intelligence. The cars, they're basically just a fleet of rolling data-collecting robots.
And you can actually see this pivot happening right in their financial reports. Revenue's at a record high, which is great, but their operating income is down a whopping 40%. Why? Because they're just pouring billions and billions of dollars into AI research. Meanwhile, their energy storage business is just quietly exploding, with 81% growth.
And that huge investment is starting to show real results. By 2025, their full self-driving system had logged over 3 billion miles of real-world data. They launched their robotaxi service in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they showed off the third generation of the Optimus humanoid robot, which Musk thinks will one day be worth more than the entire car business.
So this all-in-one AI strategy leads us to his biggest and probably most controversial software play to date.
So in 2023, he launches xAI, a direct shot at companies like OpenAI and Google, who he felt had lost their way. And of course, he gave it this incredibly grand, almost cosmic mission statement.
Then he rolled out this wild multi-step plan. First, buy Twitter for $44 billion. Second, rebrand it to X to signal his ambition for an everything app. Third, launch a totally separate AI company, xAI. And then the final move, merge X into xAI. This was the masterstroke because it gave his AI model, Grok, a direct fire hose of real-time human conversation to learn from.
And the engine driving all of this is something they call Colossus, the world's biggest AI supercomputer. We're talking about a massive cluster of 200,000 of the best NVIDIA GPUs, all housed in Memphis, Tennessee. It uses up to 420 megawatts of power. That's literally enough to power a small city, all just to train the next generation of AI.
And finally, this disruptive streak, well, it hasn't stayed just in the world of business. It's now moved squarely into politics.
For many years, Musk gave money to both Democrats and Republicans. But starting around 2022, that changed. During the 2024 election, he became a huge financial backer for Donald Trump, donating more than $250 million to his campaign. After the election, he was actually brought into the administration to co-lead a new department aimed at cutting government waste. But his time there was, well, it was brief and pretty chaotic. By May, he had a very public falling out with the administration over a spending bill, which he called an insane abomination. That led to a brief attempt to start a new third party, but he eventually backed away from that idea too.
So what's the takeaway here? After building an empire that controls the very foundations of our future, from how we get to space and how we communicate to the future of AI, Musk's entire legacy now really boils down to one critical question. Can the person who is arguably the ultimate disruptor also become a responsible guardian of the very system